Ever since the election of Tayyip Erdogan and his AK party back in 2003, Turkey has been presented as a modern and mostly democratic state, a political model for the region. Supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and the Ennahda party in Tunisia often say that Erdogan and the AKP have proved that parties like theirs, which seek a greater role for Islam in politics, can govern and preserve democratic values. However, Turkey's image is suffering as a result of the Prime Minister's heavy-handed approach with journalists who refuse to toe the line. In recent years, Turkey has jailed more journalists than any other country, often under a vaguely worded anti-terrorism law. It's usually been applied to coverage of the Kurdish separatist movement. In the run-up to the recently announced ceasefire between the biggest Kurdish party, the PKK, and the Turkish government, it remained a sensitive issue. Just days before that announcement, a prominent columnist, Hassan Jamal, suddenly disappeared from the pages of a leading newspaper, Milliyet. And Erdogan's cozy relationship with conglomerates means that he can squeeze the ones that own media outlets from all kinds of different angles. The Listening Post's Phillips now from Istanbul on the red lines that restrict Turkish journalism and are even starting to affect entertainment programs on television.
Bizim medyayla derdimiz var. Ya benim söylediğim bu ülkedeki hayırlı hizmetleri duyurun da millet duysun ya. Biz nereden nereye gidiyoruz bunu bilsin. Derdimiz bu.
When it comes to the Turkish media, it seems what the Prime Minister wants is often what the Prime Minister gets.
He has a passion to create his own media. It's up to Erdogan. He determines the red lines, so it's a daily process. You have to keep up with the rhythm.
He's a street smart person whose personal coda is based on toughness and which makes him very vulnerable to external critique.
He's very confrontational, that's his style. And if the media do his bidding, that's fine, but if they don't, he'll be after them.
A country of 75 million people, Turkey has a multiplicity of media voices. 250 private channels, more than 40 national daily papers, hundreds of radio stations. Most seem to adopt the party line. The exceptions, and there are a few, feel the heat. In January, 11 journalists were arrested during a raid on a Marxist political party meeting. Police said the group were planning to attack and murder government officials. 5 were sentenced to jail, joining the 64 media persons already behind bars. Turkey is currently the world's leading jailer of journalists, thanks to the liberally interpreted anti-terrorism law, a law that highlights deep structural problems within the Turkish legal system.
The reason why there are so many journalists in jail is about Turkey's not so democratically minded anti-terrorism law. The great majority of the journalists in jail are people who wrote things that are positive about the PKK, and Turkish legal system consider these as crime.
If you look at the numbers and who are in jail, we can see that it is almost exclusively a Kurdish problem, or problem related with the Kurdish journalists, publicists, editors. They have been often chased and charged, investigated under anti-terror law. And this law, as we all know, is the heart of the problems. We often say, as long as Kurdish problem remains on the agenda, we cannot really talk about freedom of the media, freedom of expression in Turkey.
Back in 2011, there was an extraordinary meeting in Ankara in which the government summoned newspaper editors and basically said, you know, you have to toe a patriotic line on this particular issue.
And the Kurdish issue has not gone away. What was announced on March 21st was a ceasefire. It was not a peace agreement. And in the days leading up to it, Erdogan's war on journalists covering the issue intensified. Less than a month ago, one of Turkey's major daily newspapers, Milliyet, ran a headline story detailing leaked minutes from secret peace talks between the two parties. The report did not go down well.
Eğer böyle gazetecilik yapacaksan batsın senin bu gazeteciliğin. Ve bu süreç içerisinde kim bu çözüm sürecini baltalamaya çalışıyorsa o benim de arkadaşlarımın da hükümetimin de karşısındadır.
Less than 3 weeks after Milliyet published the leaks, the paper's top political columnist, Hassan Jamal, suddenly quit. Media insiders say Jamal didn't jump. He was pushed out of the organization after weeks of government pressure.
If you're working in a government-supporting media, then you are free to talk about Kurdish issue as well as the other taboos. But if you're not supporting the government, then it can become a terrorist act when you speak about Kurdish issue or the other taboos. And I think the strongest taboo at the moment is not Kurdish affairs, not Armenian issue, and not the other classical taboos, but only the government and the Prime Minister himself.
There is only one main state TV channel in Turkey, TRT Turk, but it's by no means the only one over which the Prime Minister wields influence. It's hardly surprising the AKP gets good press here, but dig a little deeper. The various and complex business relationships Erdogan has forged with some of the media barons who control private channels means the Prime Minister now finds himself with favourable coverage across a large percentage of the country's media. For him, it's good politics. For them, it's good business.
Much of the media is owned by proprietors who have interests other than media itself, and therefore the government is able to dangle several carrots in front of the media. So when we talk about the media being oppressed by the government or the media being controlled by the government, much of the media is only too willing to do what the government wants it to do in return for certain favors.
Take the media group A, whose owners are at the same time owners of the banks or construction companies, etc. And those companies often are willing to enter public tenders. As soon as they win those big projects, the prospect of good investigative journalism in order to expose corruption or critical coverage disappears. In this kind of environment, journalism itself becomes sort of a prison.
Big media conglomerates have been known to speak out. The most famous example, a quarrel between Erdogan and Doğan Yangin, the group that once controlled more than 50% of the country's media. Suddenly, the media giant was facing a tax bill of $2.5 billion, forced into a fire sale of its media assets just to stay alive. It served as a pretty good warning to other mainstream channels attempting to criticize the government. Politicians routinely try to affect news coverage. Some try to control it. But late last year, Erdogan moved into the cultural arena, weighing in on Turkey's most popular soap opera.
Sultanım, size o kadar hasretim ki.
Magnificent Century is based on the life and reign of the 16th century Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, and is watched by millions. But ultimately, one viewer's opinion matters more than any other.
Erdogan speaks a lot, and he speaks on everything. I mean, if he sees a soap opera, which in his mind is not compatible with Turkish values, he goes and lashes out against it.
Biz öyle bir Sultan Süleyman tanımadık.
He's putting his finger into everything.
After he spoke about the Magnificent Century, I think they got the message as well. Or they were teasing him maybe, because there was too much praying, actually. So it's like they want a uniformed life. They want a uniformed life of media, culture, and all daily life as well, maybe.
The AKP has drafted a new legal package which could lead to much-needed changes in the anti-terrorism law. But that will not resolve the systemic problem in Turkey's media space. There aren't enough journalists challenging the vested interests of the country's press barons, and media freedom remains hostage to the nexus between government, industry, and the news business.
In the past decade, Turkey has changed considerably, but media freedom is still something that we haven't established yet. And the more Erdogan realizes that this image of Turkey, in which the media is not free, is hurting himself as well, internationally and even inside Turkey, I think he will adjust his behavior.
But 10 years after coming to power, Erdogan is moving in the other direction, controlling more and more media coverage, tolerating less and less criticism. A government that's a model for others in the region? Turkish journalists would argue that the opposite is true.